Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarch here. For nerds, by nerds, hanging out with some of my esteemed colleagues.
I'm Nerdarch Ted.
I'm Nathan Nerdarch.
And basically, what we want to do is we want to answer a question that was posed by DawnForgedCast. I've been checking out their videos for a while. I hadn't actually seen this one. But while Nate the Nerdarch was doing research on Psionics for 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, he came across their video asking the question.
Yeah, is it legit, Psionics? And I said, well, I can't think of it not being legitimate. But yeah, I came upon that and I said, well, yeah, that's a good question because it's never, Psionics is never in the initial core book.
Right.
For Dungeons and Dragons,
or
a Dungeons and Dragons game.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's always however many classes are like the norm. Now it's 12. So they've got the 12 common classes that are found in most campaign settings. And that's how they phrase it. And I say to myself, well, legitimacy aside, rather than I would kind of turn the question around. Well, why isn't Psionics in the core book? Well, because in a lot of editions it's been done differently. Well, why couldn't it just be included? Because they kind of made this thing in 5th where, I mean, divine spellcasting and arcane spellcasting, what used to be that differentiation, well, now when you're a multi-class spellcaster, mage cleric or paladin sorcerer, you multi-class and you have just one spell group. You don't have that kind of division like you've had in previous editions. So I would see that it's more legitimate now to just be able to add another flavor of arcane power.
Well, the way 5th edition is built does make it easier. Now, I'm going to go with this. First of all, Psionics has always got a visceral reaction from gamers.
Absolutely.
They either love it or they hate it.
Well, and part of that is understood. 2nd edition, my first exposure was with Psionics. My first exposure was in 2nd edition, and in 2nd edition there were some powers that were cool and useful and totally parallel to spells of equal level in clerics and wizard. But there were some things that gamers found a loophole or just totally abused the hell out of. I don't remember the exact name of the power, but I know both of you guys have used it, where it's like, oh, I put this power on and I just stop taking damage, and I can just
kinetic something or
kinetic
other.
Control,
or and then I can just point or touch something, and all the damage that I've stored up just gets deposited on it. Yeah, I know at one point in time, Dave said, all right, well, I'm just going to turn on this power. For the next minute, you guys just total up your damage on me. I'm just going to stand there and take it. And then he touched the door, and it exploded in 500 points of damage. Yes, that was an absolute abuse of that power.
Well, I think that's a really cool use for that power. Rather than, having the dragon, I'm jumping in the dragon's mouth. And then, taking a...
blow its head off.
Blow its head off with an uppercut from inside its skull, it's inside its mouth. That's...
It's definitely cool, but from a power standpoint, there isn't anything that mages or clerics can do that they can just be like, yes, I'm immune to all anything.
One of the issues.
So from a balancing standpoint, there's a couple things like that fall into there. But is it legit? Is it necessary? Is it useful? I think if you look at what gamers do. Realistically,
we break stuff.
Well, realistically, there's number crunchers out there that try to find loopholes and this and that. But from an actual gaming standpoint, we all game on a repeated basis over the course of years, and players are always looking for, well, what else new can I do? There's only so many race class combinations, so people will want to do something different. They want to play something that's...
So you pointed out the brokenness. And I'm not sure where you're going with that. Are you saying that's why people don't like Psionics?
Yeah. Sorry, I wander. Get used to it.
Wander
yes.
over yonder.
Yeah.
So yes, you have a couple of powers that are broken.
That ruined it for everybody.
And it gave such a bad taste in people's mouth because they saw that and they say, oh, well, this isn't balanced. I don't want it in my game.
2 points. One, that's not a theme or thematic problem. That's a design problem with that class.
Yes, and when they went into 3rd edition, they fixed that. They went and said, well, we're going to make it balanced. We're going to make it, usable with, interaction with everything else. some of my favorite powers are like, well, I think this is a touch too much. We're gonna flavor it differently and let it go this way. And I'm like,
They
well,
killed your favorite power.
Yeah, they did. Animal
Infinity.
infinity, whatever.
Affinity.
Animal affinity. I loved it. You got to actually shape change into creature parts and attack with it. I thought it was fabulous. They changed it to just stat bonuses and.
I find that you found that fabulous to be fabulous. But anyway,
fabulous.
I got two things going. I got that was one of the things, but the other thing was they definitely put the chocolate and the peanut butter with this one. And by that, what I mean is some people just don't like you mixing different genres. And when you get into psionics, we really are crossing more into sci-fi than fantasy. So when you put them together, you're putting a very heavy science fiction element and tacking it into a fantasy element. And just some gamers do not want to cross the streams.
I blame telepathic aliens and Vulcans.
They're as good as
those guys.
That's as good as anyone to blame. But oddly enough, Star Wars is almost like an epic fantasy, except for it has tons of it's all sci-fi with lots of like what I would consider more of like those fantasy tropes,
Right.
disguised and dressed up.
So yeah, a lot of people think more sci-fi it doesn't belong in a fantasy game feel. So that is I agree with both of your points on why it has not been as legitimate as it needs to be.
So from a game design standpoint, the fact that Psionics is a big chunk of information, and a lot of players feel that it's not necessary or it doesn't fit, they wind up creating, all right, well, we'll release that as its own separate system, and then allow the DMs, GMs to make the determination as to whether they're going to allow it in their game. I feel, getting back to my other point, was that players want options. Players want to be able to play things that are different. And, we've all been sitting at a gaming table, not repeatedly, but, over the spectrum for more than 20 years. We've played loads of different class combinations, race combinations. So you want to do something different. You want to play something that is different. By adding extra class options, i.e. the Psionicist, you then can say, okay, well, now I can play a Psionicist with every other race, and I now have all of these other class race choices.
Well, not only that, though, when you add Psionics from 3.5 on, not only did they add one class, but they added several.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, I'm thinking that in the spirit of 5e, they're going to have kind of a merging of the classes. I mean, like of the editions for Psionics. So I kind of went along with that when I was working on Psionics. I don't want to get into that too much here, but I have a lot of the feel of 2nd edition and power sets of the 2nd edition without the kind of number crunching. I'm just an ectoplasmic wizard that has telepathy and stuff like that.
Right.
And I feel like 3.5 was kind of like, let's just standardize this against wizard, and then no one can complain.
Right.
That's pretty much how I felt like they did. And I feel like that's a disservice to what I think was like high elegance of the 2nd edition Psionicist.
I kind of agree with that.
So I went with something that's kind of a merge of how D&D does 5th edition schools, and also how your divine what do they call it now, domain, your divine choice for domain is different. It changes your whole character concept rather than just giving you spells to cast and maybe one special power.
The schools are the same way.
Yeah,
as well.
and the schools are the same way. So 5th edition, the way they've done spellcasters has lent more to making that kind of 2nd edition Psionicist while balancing him out. So I kind of went with that with my take on it as well. But from 2nd edition, I've made those broken Psionicist characters. Not that we're like ridiculously powerful all the time, but that they just seemed they had very little powers, and seemed their powers were too powerful at different levels. There was that discontinuity between the level of the party and what the party's expectation of what they could do.
Well, when you chose your powers in 2nd edition, you were only limited by your number of psionic strength points. So it's
yes,
like,
how many times do I want to cast this per day?
So like,
and also what I would say the trees. So if you needed 3 powers that were devotions,
right.
Well, you could take 3 devotions quick at the beginning of, like, at low levels, and then purchase that science.
Right.
that you wanted, or if it had several sciences before it. So whatever prerequisites was the only thing stopping you from having detonate and disintegrate.
See,
way earlier than you should.
I actually liked 3rd edition Psionics, and I liked the way they did it. It didn't feel like magic to me. It was standardized, but you had the ultimate flexibility of power points, so you could cast them however you wanted, and a lot of your psionic powers had the ability to be enhanced, much like spells are in 5th edition. You could actually go, okay, well, I'm using whatever this power, energy ray, and it normally does 3 die 6, but I can actually pump it up, with my power points to do even more damage, or give a different effect, or quicken a power, make a power quicken.
There was a lot of nuances that I liked with it, but looking at it from a 2nd to 3rd comparison, it definitely stepped down in power. So that's where.
Oh, right, they made it unbroken. Curse you.
Well, they made those standard. Those everything had power levels, so you couldn't choose to say, you know what, I want to take that power here at 1st level.
But see, we're talking about a rule set, and we're talking about mechanics, so there has to be a standardized method.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it will be broken.
But it can't. Well, there's a difference between the way they had like summon monster 1 through 9, like that kind of mentality of, well, okay, then Psionics can do this too. It's like kind of, I agree that standardization is important, but
they did that in 3rd edition in a totally unique way that was so much cooler than summon monster. You had create
astral construct,
and it was that way. And basically, the more powerful the astral construct itself was blank, and then when you created it, you had these tables. You selected powers that you could slap onto it that would change how it functioned and how it looked. And aside from that, it could probably look any way you kind of wanted it to. Mm-hmm. But it was interesting because you were shaping ectoplasm into basically a construct.
Yeah, it was actually really cool power.
Oh, I agree that there's a lot of good things from 3rd. Just like there's a lot of good things from 2nd, but there's an issue with a lot of the balance stuff in 2nd. But then again, I just didn't like the I guess I don't really like 3.3 and 3.5 in general. Maybe that's my issue.
You notice he whispered?
Maybe I'm a big fan of 2nd and 5th, I guess, is what my takeaway from this, especially with Psionics.
You miss Thaco. That's what it really comes down to. You're pining for
Thaco.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I'm not going back.
I'm never going back.
He actually never used Thaco. This is the man who would look at the Thaco information, and he actually calculated essentially the base attack bonus when he played 2nd. So he figured out what eventually became the BA, and he just did it in 2nd.
All they did was flip the numbers.
Yeah, they just took out the mathematics step that they eventually took out. Basically, is what I did.
If they had a level 12 intellect like Nate, they would have done it years ago.
So back to not necessarily the rules, but the legitimacy of including Psionics in a campaign. I like it as a special element. For 5th, I've made it so that it is like arcane, but it's interior like circuitry and conduits. So it has that, it's like you're the spell book kind of feel, rather than you have an outward spell book, or you just have innate magical powers that you just launch. So like a sorcerer does. But that being said, I've also am incorporating it into kind of like the mythos and how like a campaign setting, which I mean, I'll voluntarily put it in Gryffindor unless you guys don't want it in there. So it depends on whether or not the Nerdarchy.
No, I actually
Psionics.
like it, and I actually like Psionics and think of it almost like not like wizards, but almost like monks in a monastery.
Right. Yeah, it has that feel to it. It can have that, especially with the Psi Warriors. It can have that feel to it.
Well, I feel like even just general psionists themselves. Yeah, I could definitely see them cloistered away studying, almost like Buddhist monks. But instead of perfecting a martial art, they're
perfecting their brain.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So, and I feel like, so 1st and 2nd, the way they use psionics, I feel kind of like made it almost like an emotional allergy to the idea of having psionics in the game. Like, no, this is messed up. I'm never ever using it. It's just wrong for D&D. And while I'm just like, oh, I really enjoyed it when I played it and when I did it, and I was like, had nothing to do with Munchkin-y stuff. I liked playing a guy that was like a mentalist or like had special powers that weren't wizards reading books.
Right.
While it's cool that you can launch fireballs, there's a certain point where it just kind of doesn't feel that cool that you're a nerd with a book. And I'm always a nerd with a book. I don't need like that same concept. Okay, but I can launch fireballs in the game. But like that kind of playing against who you are, like playing that buff fighter when you're a little guy, or playing that stealthy rogue when you're a big guy. That's kind of playing outside your own type.
Right.
I always felt like wizard wasn't my own type, like more like my own type without the magic part.
You want to mentally headbutt things.
Yes, I want to mentally headbutt things.
And of course, we can't mention psionics and its legitimacy, necessity without mentioning Dark Sun.
Oh well, yeah.
And here you have a campaign setting that pretty much we've gone the opposite end of the spectrum. Is psionics rare and this and that everywhere else? Well, here we have Dark Sun. It's a campaign world where basically every bleeding thing is psionic, including the freaking plants. So
yeah, well,
so you
it's
can't
high
legitimately have a Dark Sun campaign without psionics.
Exactly.
Yeah, and the Virion campaign I'm developing is high psionic.
Yeah, well, as soon as you can get that crap together, let's start playing. You've been talking about Virion for years, so I want to.
But this is the first part. This is probably the first month that I've actually started saying that I'm going to be building the campaign to play, rather than just thinking about it.
My Shattered Realm campaign was high magic, high psionics. It was actually basically two opposing forces that were working against each other. One civilization and culture that expounded upon the power of psionics in the mind, and the other one being that which expounded upon the power and the magic invested in your blood through the sorcerers. So so there's definitely different ways you can go.
And I love Shattered Realm. That was a lot of fun.
So I'm gonna have to go with it. At our table, it's legit, and we enjoy different flavors, so we like it.
So I give psionics the thumbs up. It's legitimate. It's necessary.
Yeah, I would say while not necessary, I really like it, and I feel like it is legitimate. And if it's not legitimate for your game, make it. I mean, that's pretty much, we're doing 5th E a lot, and I really like 5th E. And one of the 5th edition, one of the best things I like about 5th edition is, make the game your own game. Yes. And I feel like anybody that's willing to do that with psionics is going to have a good time with it, and it's not going to feel out of place.
Well, and that's what it is. At the end of the day, people always ask me questions about how to do this or how to do that. I'm like, well, or why isn't this in there? Or I don't like this in there. I'm like, it's your game. Do whatever the hell you want.
And you don't like sorcerers, wild mages, take them out.
And that is the end all be all question. When you're sitting at that, in that dungeon master chair, game master's chair, every single blessed thing about that game is your call. If you don't want something in your game, it's not in your game.
Exactly, and if the players at your table don't like that, they should probably look for another DM. I mean, the DM is a lot of work. So one of the good things about being in that chair is you get to kind of make things the way you want to. I mean, you don't want to be a dick about it, but someone asked me, I don't think anyone should be able to use pick up one of the magic missiles and use it. Okay, don't let them.
Yeah. So then you say, okay, well, if magic missiles isn't on your spell list, you can't use it. Or if you don't have the ability to cast a spell, you can't use it.
Whatever deciding factor it is.
It's really that simple. Oh, 5th edition require, all these items require attunement. There's this wand that requires attunement. Okay, well, if you don't want every item to require attunement,
take it out.
You make that decision. What does, what doesn't.
So with that, you guys can like, comment, subscribe, and even share. But after you check out this video and you're done doing all that stuff, why don't you head over to DawnForgedCast and check them out. They've got a lot of great videos over there. They have a huge catalog on Pathfinder. You can learn everything you probably ever need to know about that game over there.
You can check us out on Facebook.
You can also join the conversation over our subreddit at Nerdarchy.
So until next time, stay nerdy.